You notice it on a Tuesday. Not a threat, not a confrontation. A look. The kind of look that lasts half a second too long from someone who is supposed to be on your side. You've been in this business long enough to know the difference between distraction and surveillance. What you saw in that hallway, the corridor between the residential wing and the garage level of the compound in Riyadh, was surveillance. Quiet, deliberate, aimed at a door that only members of the inner team are supposed to know exists. You don't say anything. Not yet. Your name appears in no database that matters. You don't have a social media presence. You don't appear in any photograph taken within 30 meters of the man you protect. This is intentional. This is the job. You were recruited 18 months ago through a private security firm contracted to CR7 Limited, which is itself contracted to a holding structure you have never been given the full name of. What you were given was a briefing document, a non-disclosure agreement, a biometric ID card, and a phone number for emergencies that connects to a single voice who goes by a first name only. You protect the most followed human being on the planet. 450 million followers across platforms. A name recognized on every continent, in every language. A brand worth over $1 billion built entirely around one face. And that face, every single day, wakes up in a city in the middle of the Arabian Peninsula, surrounded by people who may or may not want him dead. You've read the threat file. Most people haven't. The compound in Riyadh is not what people imagine when they imagine where Cristiano Ronaldo lives. It is not a palace. It is an engineered environment. High perimeter walls with embedded sensor arrays. 12 cameras covering every external angle, with no blind spots by design. A bunker built beneath the east wing, poured concrete, negative air pressure, biometric access that can sustain 6 people for 72 hours without external support. There is a safe room inside the master suite, another inside the children's wing. The vehicles are armored to B7 standard. The routes to Al Nasser's training ground are rotated on a 3-day cycle. You helped design most of this. The threats that prompted it were not ordinary. In early 2025, messages began appearing, specific, coordinated, arriving across multiple platforms faster than the takedown teams could remove them. Not fan aggression, not internet noise. These messages contained details, patrol schedules, vehicle descriptions, the children's school drop-off times, information that should not exist outside of this compound, information that could only come from inside. The police in Riyadh launched an investigation. The findings were not shared with the security team. That was the first thing that made you uncomfortable. The second thing was the overhaul itself. The previous head of security, a man named Hitchman, who had worked with Ronaldo for years, who knew every protocol, every preference, every weak point in the detail, was dismissed. The entire team was restructured. A new chief was brought in. Claudio Miguel Vaz, former military, high-risk zone experience. A presence described by people who've encountered him as intimidating in a way that feels less like confidence and more like warning. You watched Vaz during his first week on the compound. He moved differently. Every professional moves with purpose. That's baseline. But Vaz moved with an awareness that had a direction to it. He wasn't scanning for threats. He was cataloging doorways, shift rotations, the gap between the end of one guard's patrol and the beginning of another's. On the third day, you watched him photograph the interior courtyard from a window on the second floor. A habit, perhaps. Situational awareness documentation. Completely standard. You haven't been able to convince yourself of that. The man you protect is not easy to protect. Not because he is reckless, he is, in fact, methodical about security in a way that surprises most people, but because of what he represents in this country at this moment. He arrived in Saudi Arabia as a signal. That he was here meant something. That he was staying meant something larger. He has become inseparable from a political project, a modernization narrative, a billion-dollar ambition to reshape what the world thinks of this place. His safety is no longer just a personal matter. Governments have interest in it. So do people who would very much like to see that political project fail. You understand this. You factor it in. You notice the second look, 3 days after the first. Same corridor, different time. You've adjusted your own patrol pattern specifically to create an irregular schedule. Something Vaz doesn't know about. You're standing in a recessed access door when you see it. Vaz on his phone. Not unusual. Command communications are constant. But the body language is wrong. He's angled away from the main camera coverage, positioned in the one dead zone you've found in the new surveillance layout. A dead zone that appeared after he supervised the rerouting of the camera cable run last week. You take a photograph with your secondary phone, the one not registered to the team network. That night, you lie on the bed in your staff quarters and you think about what you actually know versus what you think you know. You know there is an inside leak, because the threat messages contained information only insiders could have. You know the previous team was dismissed, not investigated. You know Vaz arrived with a level of familiarity with this compound that doesn't match the briefing time he was given. You know there is a dead zone in the camera coverage that didn't exist before he arrived, and that he knows where it is. What you don't know is who he's working for. The threats against Georgina Rodriguez were specific enough to prompt police involvement. Kidnapping, extortion. The family relocated to a more secure property. 4 additional guards were brought in. A bunker was reinforced. Georgina's public appearances were reduced. The children vanished from her social media entirely. These are serious responses to serious threats. But serious threats, properly managed, don't require you to fire the people who know the most about the target. Unless the people who know the most are exactly the problem. Or unless you need people in place who can be trusted to respond in a specific way when something happens. You don't sleep. By morning, you've made a decision. You won't go to Vaz. You won't go to the chain of command, because the chain of command runs through Vaz. You go back to the emergency number. The voice answers on the second ring. You speak for 4 minutes. You describe what you've seen without interpretation. You send the photograph. There is a pause. Then,
Don't change your behavior. Don't alert anyone. We'll be in contact.
3 days pass. Nothing. On the 4th day, the match day against Al Ittihad, the convoy leaves the compound at 1640. Standard protocol. 3 vehicles. The principal in the middle car. You're in the trailing vehicle. Your standard position. The route is one you've run 40 times. As you pass the interchange at King Fahd Road, the lead vehicle slows unexpectedly. Not a traffic response. A communication response. The driver is looking at his phone. Vaz's voice comes over the earpiece.
Route adjustment. We're diverting north.
This is not protocol. Route adjustments require authorization from 2 team members and a confirmed reason. You look at the driver beside you. He's already complying. You key your radio. Confirm the authorization for route change, please. Silence. Then Vaz again.
Confirmed. Northern approach is clear.
That is not an authorization. That is a repetition. You put your hand on the door handle and you make a calculation in approximately 4 seconds that most people will never have to make about anything in their lives. The vehicle continues north. You key your secondary phone and you send a single word to the emergency number. Now. What happens in the next 11 minutes is the part you are not able to talk about. What you can say is this: the convoy stops. The threat is neutralized. The man in the middle vehicle steps out at a location that is not a football stadium, is briefly informed of the situation in the least alarming terms available, and is returned to the compound within the hour. His face when he's told is not what you expected. Not fear. A very specific, quiet kind of acknowledgement. The look of someone who has always known at some level that this was the landscape he was living in, and had simply hoped the day would keep not arriving. He doesn't thank you. That isn't how it works. He goes back to his life. The match is rescheduled. A press statement cites a scheduling conflict. No photographs are taken of anything that happened that afternoon. No names are released. Somewhere in Riyadh, a process begins that you are not part of and will never be briefed on. A new briefing document arrives in your encrypted inbox 48 hours later. A new team, new protocols, new cameras with no dead zones. Your name is not in any of it. This is the job. You are the reason nothing happened. You will never appear in any story about why nothing happened. The man you protect will train tomorrow and score a goal next week, and somebody will post it. And 50 million people will watch it. And not one of them will know what Tuesday looked like in a corridor in Riyadh. You check the perimeter, you run the route. You watch the hands of everyone in the room. You start again.